Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Worms Wednesday. I'm your host Trix90, and this is Worms WMD on the Xbox. This is a ranked pro scheme game. I'm playing as the red worms, and my opponent is playing as the blue worms. This is a pretty open map as far as the map orient goes. 2 buildings on the side, 2 tanks in the middle. I believe there ends up being a Rocket League car on the left or the right after the buildings towards the end. And a whole lot of mines in the middle. My opponent goes for a more dug-in strategy than I go for. And it causes for a very interesting game. Never underestimate the worm rank that you see at the beginning of the game. My opponent went for a very interesting style, and it's not at all that their rank reflected how good they were, but rather the things that they did. I imagine it would be harder to win. So my first turn was kind of spent in mistake mode, thinking that it was going to be an easy game. That was absolutely not at all the truth. Pretty spread out game so far in terms of where we put our worms. I put my worms up high, and that's not always the best strategy because a good player can always knock those worms off. As you can see, I put a lot of trouble into making this first move. It's terribly hard to always know exactly where each pixel ends and if you can land your worm on it, because it looks like I should be able to land my worm right on the edge there, right underneath that corner, but I can't. So I opt for just throwing a random nade. I believe. Indeed I do. Out of frustration. I'm going for a tank move. Always tripping mines, great idea. Thinking that my opponent's going to go for the upper worm, but I'm going to go for the lower worm. Knocking that mine to Kingdom Come. May get stuck in that crater. So I'm already down 64 points at the beginning of this game. More than that. My opponent has not yet been touched. And I look at the nameplate and I realize that my opponent's put in the prod in the nameplate, so my opponent has had time to play and figure out the scenes. Usually people don't put the prod in the rank or in the nameplate. Give me one hint that my opponent knew what he was doing. Can't really get an angle on that worm, but I can take a try. I'm surprised at the amount of damage I'm able to do. 57 damage. Not bad. I usually do a lot of zooming in on these games. This map was so open that I really felt there wasn't too much of a reason to zoom in too much. That med pack's gonna land right on top of that mine right there. Hope it's dead. Opponent goes for it. And quickly grabs the med pack for the overall move and trips the mine. Crater's getting pretty deep. Always going for a gas grenade, not a bad idea. Another difficult spot to hit. Going for the ideally better worm, banger up high. And launching a mine right into Frank. Doing 7 plus 43, 50 damage that turn. Not an overall bad turn. More damage with the mine unseen than the actual tank. Hot dog, first 2 mine shells hit from the tank. The rest of them I could not get an angle. That was really the theme of this game with this tank. I never seemed to be able to quite get the correct angle. Because it's a pretty flat map. That worm's dug in and doesn't have much opportunity, so he's going to switch. Probably go for the tank in this next move. Again, that worm is such a low health. Might be a good idea to take him out. That's what most players would think, but that weak of a worm can be taken out very easily. His position is bad, his health is bad. It's much better to focus on a worm with higher health or a worm in a precarious position. But I think my opponent missed or didn't know what color was their color and ended up damaging their own tank that turn. Those split-second decisions, it can often be hard to know exactly where to aim, and sometimes you just make an instinct pull, and you see that happen any rank. And time's on the clock. Gotta do what you gotta do. Go for the gas grenade. And then I end up moving to the left and then worrying that I'm gonna get shot off, so I make it, again, just like my opponent did the last turn, make a split-second decision, and ended up being affected negatively by it. Arguably more than my opponent did. Whenever those tanks are fired, it shoots that worm completely in a direction you don't expect. Doing 31 and 5 to 5 to both of those worms that are now poisoned on the left side. It's time for me to get that worm out of that position. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it though. I think I opt just to move a little bit more towards the interior of that building and to hit it with a homing missile. Hitting the barrel, also doing extra damage, but in a tank, so it's only halved. So a total of 43 damage. And then 5 and 5 to those 2 gassed worms on the left. That worm's still stuck in there and can't move out. Not a lot of options. As I learned from my last game against, or you might have seen from the last game, that worm select can be maybe your most powerful weapon. If used correctly, it can be easy to miss. Overall, great turn by my opponent there. Hitting that worm, and when that worm was knocked off, going for a different worm. Hitting me for 64-15, and I believe 5 or 6 on his own worm there at the end. And of course 5 and 5 to both the worms on the left. A lot of damage dealt that turn. Having some trouble climbing up this cliff. Should have plenty of time to make this turn. Going to damage my opponent. Damage and 5 and 5. That tank is of course smoking, which means it's very close to being destroyed. I believe the other tank is also in a similar state. Yes, but has much more health relative to the worm that's on the inside than the one that's currently moving. 3 and 30. I'm mostly worried about that 94 worm at this point. That can be a great obstacle if I don't take care of it soon. And I might lose this worm. Luckily, I did not get hit off. And I could have very easily fell into that mine. It would have been all over for that worm in that turn, landing on that mine. Maybe even at the right angle could have gotten shot off. I am thinking about shotgunning my way through that wall and hitting that other worm for 25, but I want to wait until my opponent gets under 25 health with that other worm. 9 minutes and 45 seconds on the clock, and I opt to just remove that worm in the tank. Again, that's a very precarious weapon to use. The game is known for lagging out, or sometimes crashing completely when that weapon's been used. Sometimes it comes up back after 1 turn, sometimes it comes back after 2, and I have seen games where it doesn't come back after 3 turns. Some very specific situations, I believe, involve using 2 of them. Here we got some girder trouble being involved. Boxing my worm in. Placement of that exact girder can be very difficult, but very important to make sure that worm can't get out. I'm confident that I can get out of that, though. I think there's just enough room for me to squeeze that worm through. Continuing the theme of gas grenades. Luckily, this one was a little bit better. Doing the initial damage and then extra gas damage. Would have liked to have done that earlier in the game. Opponent still has 4 worms on the board. I believe I'm stuck at 3. So I like my odds a little bit better. Oh no, my opponent does have 3. So do I. Oh, nope, my opponent does have 4. Can't see the nameplates moving right now. More girders. Doesn't make it in, and here comes back the T-bomb. Shouldn't even be a question, finishes off that tank. Five, and 5 across the board for those gas grenades this turn. Not a great positioned worm. I'll try to do the best I can. Thinking about the airstrike, but I want to save it for that more health worm on the far right underneath that building. I believe I go just to launch a random shot. I want to go for a grenade, but I think I accidentally select the rocket launcher and don't realize it. And it ends up getting shot all the way to nowhere. Continuing the countdown on the worms. The health is spread pretty evenly across the board, but I'm down 1 more worm than my opponent at this point. Now knocked off, so I'm going to be significantly down on health as this game continues. My 1 worm has now hit its 1 health threshold and can no longer lose anymore. Instead of going for the shotgun, I opt to go for the safer strategy and tunnel my way through. So long as I'm able to push that worm away far enough from me, I won't be hit by the explosion, I won't be dealt any damage. Luckily, I am just outside the blast radius, but I am still down on health as this game goes, and I've only removed a worm from my opponent's cycle. Yes, it was a better positioned worm for my opponent, but nonetheless, my opponent still has 1 tank on the field, which can do a lot to me. And right now it is not looking so good for me. Opponent's going for a homing missile. Let's see Will it connect? And it will not connect. It will hit that piece of ornament right in the middle of the map. Shutting out. If that wasn't there, I don't know that it still would have hit. Really would have come close with that edge. Definitely would have finished that worm off if it would have connected. I'm hoping for this point for a health pack to land anywhere near me. It won't definitively give me the win. I'm still confident I can get the win. Especially because I have 2 worms left and I have an airstrike left on the field. And now it's looking like a better shot to hit that tank. Go for a random shot. Just off. And it should be it for my worm this turn. My opponent can connect with that tank. But I am in an awkward position still. My opponent might be giving me the tank. Getting out and going for the auto turret is an interesting strategy. Because both my worms are there, it's not a bad move. But I really hate auto turrets. I will do just about anything to get rid of them. Finish off that tank with 32 damage, as well as additional damage from the explosion. My opponent is now down to 1 health, and I'm at 27. Jetpack into what is really at this point no man's land, and I'm at this point thinking about dismantling a sheep for its sticky donkey paste. Why? I have no idea. More girder trouble this time. The large girder is being employed by my opponent. 5 minutes and 5 seconds left on the clock until we hit overtime. Really not a fan of that auto turret. Thinking where I should go, I end up picking this far left side. I believe this should provide me enough cover sitting underneath of this large building if I'm hit by a bunker buster. Still don't like that auto turret's down though. I don't often see this be employed. It goes right over my bow and into the ocean. Wouldn't have been a bad shot. I just don't think that there is the angle with that terrain there. At this point, that worm still has 1 health, but at least I can maneuver it out. I'm looking at this point just to get my worms away from each other in the event a bunker buster does come down. I'm not so sure that I improve my position here. Crafting a bunker buster this turn. Maybe if I sit directly above the bunker buster would hit my worm and stop there, the worm with 1 health, so I compromise for this position. Since bunker busters don't move through worms, once they hit a worm they stop. They can move through any other terrain except vehicles or turrets. But if they hit a worm, they stop, and I'd much rather hit that 1 health poisoned worm than anything else at this point. Opponent going for a tunnel, burrowing in into midfield, what is really no man's land. Again, that worm also at 1 health and also poisoned. Lo and behold, the health pack arrives on my side. What do you guys think? Should health packs be in random spawns? being pro? I don't really think so. I think any level of kind of chaos mid-game that isn't within the control of either player shouldn't be a part of it. Nonetheless, I take it. In the future, if I become a little bit more confident in my skills, I'm going to stop. I'm just going to shoot them. Probably end up wasting a turn, though. If you don't take it, your opponent will. And it is, as of right now, or as of last turn, a very close game. But right now I have a 26 worm and a 26 worm. My opponent is sitting there with just a 1 worm, and I'm waiting to hit with a bunker buster. But I'm not exactly confident I can make that position. Maybe foreseeing the eventuality that I might try to get in there, my opponent continuing to block off that hole. Not a bad idea. Going for the skip go this turn. Almost forgot about this auto turret if it weren't for Cameron panning over. Probably would have completely forgot about it. It's perhaps the most dangerous thing on the field for me at this point, and it can ruin my day if I move just a little too close to it. Opponent opting to burrow again, another deeper hole. Pretty good burrow. Not a bad formation, relatively easy to get out of. But now that worm is lower than my other 2 worms. I go to alternate the worms because I want to move this worm down and I want to have 1 worm down in that spot. And I don't think I can get the correct angle to get directly above to that turret, because that's where I'm going to be going for next. I think if I give it enough turns, I can try to hit my opponent from the top of that tower. That one little piece of geometry that's still stuck up there is holding that turret up. If I can get to that, I might be able to basically shoot into that hole. Opponent going for a magnet, repelling. Not a bad idea. Rarely ever see the magnet attracting being used. Making it very difficult to get out of there. 1 minute left on the clock. And I'm able to get up. Will I be able to make it to the turret if the turn ends? I will. And I finish the turn off. Just peppering the side of the field. Getting pretty significantly deep into there, and I think that puts my opponent into a bad position. .38 seconds left on the clock. My opponent will continue to retreat further east at this point. And I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to hit him with a bunker buster. Far enough out of range of that magnet, and it connects, and that's GG. Thank you everyone for joining me for another Worms Wednesday. Great match with my opponent. Came down to the wire there. I will see you guys next Wednesday. Have a great week. Stay warm, stay healthy. Peace out.